Wow. I just wish Randy had something to do to keep himself busy. So we're always fascinated by what's going on in the ports, and we get to hear from one of the leaders shaping port operations and logistics. Please welcome Dr. Noel Hacegaba, Chief Operating Officer of the Port of Long Beach.
Well, good morning. And it is my pleasure on behalf of Long Beach Mayor Rex Richardson, the city of Long Beach, and the Port of Long Beach to welcome you to our fair city. You know, Long Beach is a city on the rise, a city on the move, and one of the reasons for that is because of our incredible port. And today I'm joined by several of my teammates, so if you're from Long Beach, raise your hand so that everyone recognizes you. All right. And I know that the Trojan marching band was just incredible. I never get tired of hearing them. Any Trojans in the room? All right. I got to hear them twice this year, once on the campus during the World Trade Week breakfast, and once again here in Long Beach. Nick, Randy, thank you so much. You guys did an exceptional job laying the groundwork for what I'm going to be contributing today. The theme, I think, is very pertinent. And one of the things I like about this summit is we not just talk about the future, we shape it through conversation, through the networks and the connections. And in fact, the future is here. I see many students here. You are the future of our industry. And one of the reasons why we invite you and we encourage you to come here is because one day you're going to be managing, you're going to be leading all of these initiatives, all of these projects, and all of these things that you just heard Randy and Nick talk about. And I could not be more excited to be part of this today. So I'm going to contribute to this summit by talking a little bit about how the Port of Long Beach is helping to transform the culture of the global supply chain. We've been talking a lot, and later this afternoon there will be a panel on the complexity surrounding trade. But let me just say this. All the shifting trade policies and all the introduction of new tariffs certainly has a potential to upend legacy relationships on the trade level. It has a potential to fundamentally shift the way that we relate with other countries. But if there's one thing that we've learned in our industry is that challenges present opportunities. And when it comes to the global supply chain, we've learned that in order for us to not just survive, but thrive, we've got to look at the opportunities behind those challenges. We learned that throughout the supply chain crisis. We all came together, we developed what I call the muscle memory, where we improved those handoffs between different modes in the supply chain, and we kept the American economy going. We kept goods flowing. We kept America safe by ensuring that PPE was crossing our docks, making their way to those who needed it. As a result of that, in 2020, we went from doom and gloom to fast and furious. And all of a sudden, when we were at home, we started consuming more goods than ever before. And that catapulted the Port of Long Beach to our best year on record. And that continued until this year. In fact, in 2024, in Q3, we started noticing a lot of shippers front-loading their products. There were a lot of shippers who were anticipating that there would be shifts in tariffs, that there would be new trade policies. And that uptick in cargo catapulted us to our best year on record in 2024. In fact, between April of 2024 and June of 2025, we had 11 consecutive months of year-over-year increases. So when people ask me, how are the tariffs affecting the ports? As of now, they're actually driving growth. In fact, if you look at this chart, in May, we sustained our first year-over-year decline. It was sharper in June, but then the cargo came roaring back in July. We just set a record for the month of July in our 117-year history. And we think that for the rest of this year, unless something changes, there's some dramatic changes, we think we're going to end the year either flat or better than last year. And remember, last year was a record year. One of the invisible headlines is the resilience of the American consumer throughout COVID, in the years after COVID, and even in historically high inflation. The American consumer continues to buy. Yeah, some would argue that we're buying more stuff with credit because of inflation, but we continue to buy. And when you look at that, if you look at the latest tally from the Commerce Department, you'll see that in the month of June, consumption was up about $70 billion. So that's one of the data points that it's important to keep in mind as we consider what might happen down the line. So one of the hallmarks at the Port of Long Beach is we anticipate challenges, we anticipate disruption, but we always keep an eye towards the future. And so planning has always been part of our secret sauce, part of our recipe for success. It was Benjamin Franklin who reminded us that he who fails to plan, plans to fail. And so we take planning seriously, and in supply chain, you have to plan. You have to use all the data and all the information you have at the moment and make the best calls that you can. But there was another philosopher who was actually a professional boxer, Iron Mike Tyson, remember him? He said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And the global supply chain has been punched in the mouth a few times in recent years. So I want to get back to culture. So how do we transform the culture to inject resilience, to inject flexibility, to inject the ability to pivot and course correct at a moment's notice? This is something that we've all learned to do together. We're better together. As John Maxwell likes to remind us, teamwork makes the dream work. And part of that culture is all of us coming together to have a conversation in the same room at the same time about what the future looks like. You just heard that just a few moments ago with Nick and Randy. And that's what we need to do more of in order to transform our culture. Tomorrow's just ahead. And if you wait for the future to come, it's too late. You have to shape it. And that's why, again, this summit is so important to our industry, because we have those conversations. So how are we shaping the future in Long Beach? America's second largest seaport. We led the nation between January and April in cargo volumes. But again, when you look at the ports of LA and Long Beach, massive, massive economic engines for the nation's economy. Massive economic engines. Goods movement is literally the economy in motion. And the more containers that cross our docks, the more we contribute to that economy. We're investing about $2.3 billion over the next 10 years. That's our CapEx plan. That's on top of nearly $5 billion that we've invested over the last 15 years. This is the single largest CapEx program of any port authority in North America, possibly the world. Now, why are we doing that? Well, as I said, we've been around for over 100 years, but we recognize that in order for us to stay relevant and competitive, in order for us to continue to contribute to the supply chain, we've got to reinvent ourselves. And the best way for us to do that is to offer the best facilities, world-class facilities, upgraded infrastructure, smart, sustainable, zero emissions infrastructure that will make the shipment and the movement of goods faster, more reliable, more predictable. So how are we investing this? Over half of it is all on rail. We think that rail is a key to our success. The more containers we can move directly from a ship onto a train into the interior of the nation will expand our reach. Already today, the cargo containers that cross our docks reach all 435 congressional districts. And if we can move more of those intermodally and get them on a train, we can get the product to those end consumers faster, more reliably, and more sustainably and safely. The Class 1 railroads are pairing our investments with investments of their own. You may have heard of a little project called the BIG Project. It stands for Barstow International Gateway, so that's a very clever name. And they're developing about 4,000 acres in Barstow. They're basically building out a rail yard. And if you think about the connection between our ports here in Southern California and Barstow, we're literally building the longest port in the world. Because that's exactly how we need to think about investments. We can no longer think in silos. We have to think about the bigger picture and the system of systems and think of how we can become a force multiplier to our partners. And as you can see here, they've thought through how this operation would work. It's actually more expanded than just an intermodal facility. They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about how they can support and improve the experience of shippers. Union Pacific is another Class 1 partner. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of their own. and we're collaborating with them as well to ensure that those connection points between our ports here in Southern California and all their inland markets are seamless, more efficient, and more sustainable. At the Port of Long Beach, we continue to deepen our channels in order to allow bigger and bigger ships. The ocean carriers love bigger ships because of the economies of scale. They've been upsizing their vessels over the last 15 years. And as they've done that, they've also decarbonized their operations. But offering deeper channels, wider channels, enables them to take advantage of those economies of scale. And that is why we're partnering with the Army Corps to make the approach in our port from take it from 74 feet to 80 feet. And believe it or not, those 6 feet make a big difference. Just last month, we broke ground on one of the newer projects, if you will. One of our partners, ITS at Pier G, broke ground on this project that is essentially going to fill a slip that will boost their capacity by 50%. In about 3 years' time, this terminal will have the ability to increase their capacity by 50%. And there are many other projects in the pipeline that we will be announcing in the months ahead that demonstrate not just how we're contributing to the supply chain, but how we're transforming the culture of the global supply chain in the process. We're pairing all of our physical investments with digital investments. You heard from Nick talk about digitalization being a key tenet of what the future holds. And I think all of us in this room now understand that. The Supply Chain Information Highway was designed to improve end-to-end visibility. It was designed as a tool to enable all of our partners, from the ships to the trucks to the trains, the terminal operators, the shippers, to have access to real-time data so that they can improve their operations. It was not developed or introduced to replace any existing processes or any existing projects or platforms, but as a complement to ensure that the different segments of the supply chain have access and have visibility to that end-to-end data point. And when you look at how we're building this, is we're partnering with other port authorities, with each of the port authorities, including the Port of Los Angeles and the other 4 container ports in California, to ensure that all of our shippers, common customers, and carriers have that visibility and have that ability. And this is just a quick rendering that shows how we envision this, having that common corridor so that that data can travel more seamlessly, more efficiently, and be accessible and visible to all of our partners. Thanks to the state of California, we partnered with the other 4 container ports in the state to ensure that we're leveraging all of our digital tools and digital infrastructure to support the supply chain. We're also, in the coming months, going to be announcing a brand new feature that the supply chain information will help enable, and that is to come up with a universal truck appointment system across the San Pedro Bay Ports complex. And I know that our friend who's right here in the front, Robert Loya, loves that. He's the president of the Harbor Trucking Association. So we're doing this for them. We're doing this for our terminals. We're injecting predictability, leveraging not just all of our infrastructure, but also our digital assets. So let's talk about another way that the Port of Long Beach continues to help transform the global supply chain. We are proud that in 2025, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of our Green Port policy. We're calling it Leading Green. And if you think about where we were in 2005, we were in a much different place. There wasn't really much emphasis on sustainability. In fact, when the Port of Long Beach announced and declared boldly that they were going to become the world's first green port, there were a lot of skeptics. There was a lot of pushback. There were some who were saying that that would be the beginning of the end of the Port of Long Beach. And yet here we are 20 years later with not just a port who made that bold declaration, but an entire industry, an entire globe that has come along and said, we believe the same and we need to get there and we need to work together to get there faster. And this is a quick timeline that walks you through that journey. And again, nothing that I've shared so far, nothing that I will present to you in the coming moments has been done alone. The only way we can get there is when we work together. So this is our resume. This is what we've been able to do with your partnership and all of our industry partners. From 2005 to 2025, every category of pollution has been dropped significantly, has been reduced dramatically. And that's in large part to the ocean carriers stepping up, slow steaming, transitioning to cleaner fuels, our marine terminal operators, our truck operators transitioning to renewable gas, cleaner gas, zero emissions, whether it's battery electric or hydrogen powered. Here at the Port of Long Beach, our terminals, today about 20% of all the cargo handling equipment at container terminals in Long Beach are zero emissions. And so we've got this stretch goal of getting to zero emissions cargo handling equipment by 2030 and zero emissions trucks by 2035. And this is the product of a collaborative partnership between the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and all of our industry partners to get to zero emissions as quickly as we can. Now, we've got a little work to do on the trucking side. And obviously, the political landscape has shifted a little bit. But thanks to all of our partners in the trucking industry, and thanks to investments by the ports, we continue to incentivize that transition. And we're very hopeful that in the years ahead, you're going to see an acceleration of that in the years ahead, partly because of all the investments we're making at the port to enable that transition by installing charging stations. We have today nearly 140 truck charging stations. We've got another 100 in the pipeline, and we're going to continue to invest in our infrastructure inside the port to make it a lot easier for our trucking partners, motor carriers, to make that transition a reality. Last December, we released this white paper. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to look it up. It's a great primer on the challenges and opportunities with regard to clean fuels and how the shipping lines are working with ports like ours and ports across the Pacific to ensure that we're doing everything possible, leaving no stone unturned to make sure that we accelerate and decarbonize and get to a true net zero supply chain. Let's get back to culture again, because everything I just described and everything I'm telling you we're doing in partnership with our partners cannot be done without next level collaboration. And it's going to be key to our ability to continue to transform our culture together. Teamwork truly makes the dream work. It makes the green dream work. And if we're all roaring in the same direction, and if we all share the same values and we all share the same vision and the same destination, we're going to get there a lot faster. An example, case in point, we're working with our ocean carriers, and I know several of you are here today. We're partnering with them. We're asking them, what are your plans? What fuels are you exploring? How are you thinking about your fleet in the future? And how can we support that with the infrastructure we make available at the ports? And we're building on a strong foundation because over the last 15 years, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles have been pioneers and trailblazers in this space. Anything from cold ironing, what is now known as shore-to-ship power, building out the infrastructure to enable that transition, continues. Slow steaming, rewarding our ocean carriers to reduce emissions by slowing the last 20 or 40 nautical miles. We're building on that by creating a network across the Pacific to ensure that that transition happens faster. We just heard from Randy talk a little bit about this, the power supply. How on earth are we going to get there when our grid is, according to some, inadequate for our needs today? How on earth are we going to get there? How are we going to power this transition? Not just at the ports and not just across our industry, but across our state, across our communities. When you look at this chart, power consumption demand is expected to increase sixfold just between 2019 and 2030. And this is why a port like ours is going way beyond our scope. We're going way beyond our core mission. And we've signaled to the industry, and we've said to the state of California, we want to help. We want to support your goal, 25 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2045. Now, let me just put that in perspective for you. 25 gigawatts can power 25 million homes. That's how much juice we're talking about. And we see this as an opportunity to continue to build out our port in a sustainable way, while at the same time supporting the state's needs for renewable power in order for us to help support that transition statewide. We call this pure wind, and we're literally trying to spin toward a greener future by enabling the assembly of the world's largest offshore turbines. And when I was listening to Randy talk about his concept in advanced manufacturing, this is an example of that, right here in a port right next door. And it's about creating these new jobs that will also support this transition to a greener future. Finally, and most importantly, we can't talk about the future without talking about people. Humans will always be at the center of our economy, and they will always be at the center of the global supply chain. And that is why, if we want our future to be bright, we have to continue to invest in our people. And that's why the Global Supply Chain Institute exists, to prepare and train today the future leaders of our industry. And you're all here today. At the Port of Long Beach, we're doing our part. We're partnering with the Port of Los Angeles, the ILWU, the PMA, to build best-in-class goods movement training facility that in the years ahead will prepare all of our frontline workers with the skills they'll need to be able to handle all this sustainable equipment, to handle all the changes that our terminal operations will undergo. But we're also trying to reach youth younger than ever. It's kind of like in sports, right? It used to be in the old days that universities and college programs would go after the high schoolers, and then they went after the middle schoolers, and then they started going after the sixth graders, right? Looking for talent. Well, we need to do the same thing. If we want to assemble the best team to manage and lead our supply chains, we have to expose our youth to the opportunities that exist today and that will exist in the future. And that is why the Port of Long Beach has partnered with the Long Beach Unified School District. We've already opened 3 different academies or pathways. And the whole idea here is to create those pipelines from a very young age through high school, through community college, through university, to ensure that we've got women and men who are aware of our industry, who are motivated by the challenges, and who are willing to join us in this effort. Finally, what got us here won't get us there. And I think everyone in this room recognizes that. We've got a long way to go, but in a short period of time, if we are to achieve our goals. And here's the great thing about our industry, and the one thing that we like to say at the Port of Long Beach, you know, we don't chase trends, we set them. We don't wait for change, we drive it. And that's what all of us always have to think in mind and have in mind, because the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what we're doing here together. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Enjoy the rest of the conference.